Welcome back to the Growl with Hank, episode 17. I am your host, Hank Brewski. Happy belated 250th birthday to America. We made it a quarter of a millennium, and I want to talk about how we spent it. Friday and Saturday, July 3rd and 4th, President Trump gave two speeches, one at Mount Rushmore, one on the National Mall. They were not the speeches most of your grandparents would recognize from previous Independence Days. Every president going back a lot of years has used the 4th of July for what my grandmother would call, quote, the unity speech. Trump broke that tradition. He gave a political speech instead, about the communist menace, about the mail-in ballots he wants to restrict, about his Iran war. And that was the moment, our 250th. In Tehran, meanwhile, the funeral processions for the late Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei began. Millions of mourners. The talks in Doha, which we told you about last week, made positive progress before pausing for the funeral. President Trump made a chilling public comment. He said the U.S. could have struck Iranian leadership gathered at the funeral, but chose not to. As a veteran, I have to talk about that. At home, President Trump approved $846 million in disaster relief, only for Republican-leaning states, and FEMA, under this administration, has been approving disaster aid for red states 89% of the time. For blue states, 23%. This is a two-tier disaster system, and it is going to blow up on somebody. We will get to it. In Memphis, a 20-year-old named Tyron Johnson was shot and killed by Tennessee National Guard soldiers early Sunday morning. He was armed. But he was shot by soldiers on American streets, and that raises a bigger question we need to talk about. In Colorado, the Aspen Acres Fire is now one of the largest wildfires in Colorado state history. 87,000 acres burned, 11,000 people evacuated, over 700 firefighters on the line. This is the story we started last week, and we are not letting it go. Coffee up, let us go. Time for the Bears Brew. 4 stories, let us go. Let me set the scene. July 3rd, Mount Rushmore. The place where 4 American presidents are carved into a mountain. Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt. Not a bad group. Trump gave a speech there Friday evening, right before Independence Day. Then, Saturday, July 4th, the actual 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Trump gave another speech on the National Mall. Severe storms delayed the event. The crowd had to seek shelter, but Trump gave the speech. And here is what NPR said about it. Quote, President Trump ushered in America's 250th anniversary with a darkly political speech that swerved from the typically apolitical, unifying speeches past presidents have given to mark Independence Day. That is not a partisan take, that is a factual observation. Trump warned of a communist menace. He praised his own Iran war. He vowed to restrict mail-in ballots. He attacked Democrats by name. Now, I want to be fair. I am not going to sit here and tell you Trump does not have the right to speak how he wants. He is the president. He is a political figure. And plenty of Americans voted for him precisely because he is a fighter. If you want a fighter, you got one. Fair. But I have watched Reagan give 4th of July speeches. I have watched both Bushes. I have watched Clinton. I have watched Obama. I have watched Biden. All of them, across every party, use the 4th of July for a unifying moment. That is a 245-year tradition. And on the one 4th of July that mattered most, our 250th, the tradition broke. Here is what I really wish had happened. On the 250th, I wish we had heard a presidential speech that celebrated what all Americans, left and right, worker and business owner, veteran and civilian, young and old, share in common. I wish we had heard about the Declaration of Independence in a way that reminded us all why we are still one country. I wish the president had, for 1 hour, put down the political sword and picked up the pen of Thomas Jefferson. That did not happen. And I want to be honest, it did not happen from anyone else either. There was no Democratic response speech. There was no bipartisan resolution. There was no shared moment. Both parties treated the 250th as just another political day. Both parties failed the moment. That is my complaint. Not that Trump gave a political speech. That is his right. My complaint is that on the one day when every American should have been remembered, we lost the moment. And that is on all of us, not just him. Story 2. Last week I told you talks between the US and Iran were supposed to happen in Doha. They happened. Tuesday, July 1st. And here is what came out. Indirect talks. Meaning, US envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner talked with Qatar's Prime Minister, and Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi talked with Qatar's Prime Minister, and Qatar and Pakistan carried the messages between them. That is how you know Iran is not fully in yet. They are refusing direct talks. But progress happened. Qatar and Pakistan issued a joint statement saying, quote, "Positive progress was made on issues related to the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. Key wins. Iran is going to get $6 billion in frozen assets released. That money can only be used to buy U.S. food and medicine. Iran claims to have exported over 40 million barrels of oil since the U.S. blockade was lifted. Working groups are being set up for future talks." Then the talks paused. Why? Because Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's official funeral procession started this weekend. Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran for nearly 40 years, was killed in the U.S. and Israeli strikes on February 28th when this whole war started. His body was finally being publicly mourned. His son Mojtaba is now the supreme leader. The funeral is going to run through this coming Thursday, July 9th, when he is buried in Mashhad. Millions of Iranians are expected. Anti-US and anti-Israel chants are ringing through Tehran, Qom, and Iraq. Estimates are 15 to 20 million mourners across all sites. That would make it the biggest state funeral in Iranian history. And there is one more thing you need to know. President Trump made a public comment about the funeral this weekend. He said the United States could have struck Iranian leadership gathered at the funeral. He said we chose not to preserve negotiating partners. He also said the tears from mourners might be, quote, fake. Look, I am a veteran. I served. Here is what has to be said. You do not publicly discuss whether or not you considered striking a religious ceremony with millions of civilians present. Not because Trump was wrong or right about the tactical option, but because the President of the United States is not supposed to talk about attacking funerals. Any funeral, anywhere. That is a norm that goes back to Eisenhower. There is a reason we do not weaponize funerals in modern warfare. It is one of the last decency lines humanity has agreed on. Talking about it out loud, publicly, in real time, blurs that line for everybody. Restraint should be silent. Boastful restraint stops being restraint. The talks resume after the funeral, that is roughly next Monday. Iran is signaling August tolls on ships transiting the strait if we do not lift more sanctions. So the fragile ceasefire we told you was hanging on remains fragile. But it is holding. Story 3. And this is going to make Americans of every party mad if you are honest about it. Over the weekend, President Trump announced approval of $846 million in disaster relief. The recipients? Republican-leaning states. Not a mix, not need-based, political-leaning-based. And this is not a one-time thing. Recent analysis of FEMA approval rates under the Trump administration has found this. Red states are getting disaster relief approved roughly 89% of the time. Blue states, roughly 23% of the time. That is a 4-to-1 gap. On the same natural disasters, Arkansas tornadoes get approved, West Virginia flooding gets denied, Washington state windstorm gets denied. Extended relief for North Carolina after Hurricane Helene got approved. There is a pattern. The administration says this is fiscal responsibility, state-level responsibility. Some of the denials come with conditions attached. Some come with delays. Some come with, quote, incomplete paperwork requirements. What they do not come with is consistency. Now let me be a bear about this in the way you should expect from this show. First, this is not new. Both parties, when in power, have played favorites with federal money. Under Biden, blue states got some priority in certain infrastructure allocations. Republicans complained, rightly so. What is new here is the scale and the openness. This is not subtle. This is 89 to 23. This is $846 million to Republican-leaning states specifically. This is a president who is saying in the open that federal disaster relief is a political tool now. You know what this reminds me of? Episode 11, the Anti-Weaponization Fund. $1.776 billion for people who claimed the legal system was misused against them. We told you it was a slush fund for political allies. Republicans in Congress killed it. That win happened because it was too obvious. This disaster relief pattern is the same thing, distributed across a broader map with less obvious paperwork. It is the same dysfunction with better cover. Here is what I want every listener to hear. If you are a Republican, imagine a Democrat president giving disaster money 89% of the time to blue states and 23% to red. You would be growling. So would I. So would every conservative in this country. If you are a Democrat, imagine what will happen the next time a Democrat is in the White House. That tool will be theirs. That tool is being built right now, and it is being built on your watch. We will get to this in the Growl. Last story, quick hits. Memphis. Early Sunday morning, 4 a.m. Tennessee National Guard soldiers, deployed to Memphis as part of the Safe Task Force, were on foot patrol responding to gunshots downtown near Ida B. Wells and Gayoso Avenues. They encountered a 20-year-old man named Tyron Johnson. He was armed with a handgun. During a foot pursuit, he reportedly turned toward the soldiers with his weapon. 2 Guard members fired. Johnson was killed at the scene. Guard medics provided first aid. He was pronounced dead. This is the first deadly incident tied to the Memphis Guard deployment, which started in 2025 under the Trump administration to fight violent crime. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation is running the investigation. As a veteran, I have thoughts on Guard deployments to American cities. We will dig into it in Pause and Effect. Colorado. The Aspen Acres Fire is now one of the largest wildfires in Colorado history. 87,000 acres. Started June 29th near a campground in Pueblo and Custer counties. Human-caused. Over 11,000 people evacuated. 212 structures destroyed. Over 700 firefighters on the line. Governor Polis has asked for a statewide fireworks ban. This is the story we started last week when 3 American firefighters died on the Utah-Colorado border. It is still burning. Colorado has burned over 190,000 acres in wildfires this year, and it is only July 6th. Super Typhoon Bavi is hammering the northern Mariana Islands, American territories in the Pacific. Winds, storm surge, and potential flooding. This gets less coverage because those islands are far away and small in population. But they are Americans, and they need us to pay attention. Quick other notes. The USA plays Belgium tonight in the World Cup round of 16 in Seattle. FIFA suspended Folarin Balogun's red card, so our top scorer is playing. Go US! Paul Pelosi, the husband of Nancy Pelosi, was involved in a hit-and-run in California that caused, quote, major damage to a parked car. This after his previous hammer attack incident. That family cannot catch a break. Trump accounts are now live, which is the administration's savings vehicle for kids. Details are murky. Watch for updates. Xi Jinping in China promoted a new set of generals over the weekend in a shakeup designed to secure military loyalty. Not comforting. And Congress is arguing about immigration status for spouses of American citizens. Watch that one. Quick economic update. Oil is at $68 a barrel for WTI, Brent at $71.66. Gas nationally is at $3.79. That is 15 cents lower than 2 weeks ago. If the Doha talks keep progressing, we may hit 3.50 by August. Pause and effect time. And today, as a veteran, I need to talk about something that got very little coverage over the weekend, but that touches on the deepest tradition of the American military. National Guard soldiers on American streets. The 20-year-old who was killed in Memphis Sunday morning, Tyron Johnson, is dead. He was armed. He reportedly pointed his weapon at Guard soldiers during a foot pursuit. Those soldiers, under the rules of engagement, made a decision that Guard soldiers should not typically have to make on American soil. Because Guard soldiers are not typically on American streets doing law enforcement patrols. Let me explain what the National Guard actually is and why this matters. The National Guard is a hybrid force, part military, part civilian, made up of citizen soldiers who serve part-time while holding regular civilian jobs. Governors normally command them within their states. In wartime or federal emergency, the president can activate them under Title 10, which puts them under Department of Defense control. For most of American history, the Guard has been used within states for 2 main things. 1. Wartime deployment overseas. 2. In-state emergency response. Hurricanes, wildfires, riots, border support, that kind of thing. What the Guard has not been used for, at least not routinely, Is patrol duty in American cities to fight everyday crime? There is a specific reason for that. The Founding Fathers were terrified of the military policing civilians. They watched British soldiers do it before the Revolution. They wrote it into the Bill of Rights that soldiers cannot be quartered in your home without your consent. In 1878, Congress passed the Posse Comitatus Act. That is the law that generally prohibits U.S. military forces from being used for civilian law enforcement. The National Guard, when serving in state roles under a governor, is exempt from that law. But the philosophy behind it, that military and police should be separate, is deep in our constitutional bones. So what is happening in Memphis? In 2025, under the Trump administration, the National Guard was deployed to Memphis to fight violent crime. This was requested by the Tennessee governor and coordinated with federal authorities. The idea was that Memphis had a homicide rate that regular police could not manage. The Guard would help stabilize the situation. Was crime bad in Memphis? Yes. Memphis has been one of America's most violent cities for a long time. That is a real problem. But here is where I have to be a veteran and be honest. When you use soldiers to police civilians, you change the fundamental relationship between the government and the people. Soldiers are trained to defeat enemies. Police are trained to enforce laws. Those are two different mindsets. When you send trained warfighters into a Memphis neighborhood, you get military-grade responses to civilian situations. And civilians die. Tyron Johnson was armed. That matters. He reportedly turned towards soldiers with a weapon. That matters. But in a police interaction, he might have had more chances. More de-escalation attempts. More non-lethal options. That is speculation. But it is grounded in the reality that policing and soldiering are different skill sets. And when you blend them, you get outcomes that the American constitutional tradition was explicitly trying to prevent. What are the practical concerns going forward? 3. 1. The precedent. Once we accept that National Guard patrol duty in American cities is normal, the next administration can and will use it. Whether that administration is Republican or Democrat. Whether it targets your community or the neighboring community. The tool you build for this mayor and this governor gets used by the next mayor and the next governor. We have said this on the show before. It applies here too. 2. Militarization creep. The current use case is fighting violent crime. Legitimate. But what happens next year when the Guard is used for immigration enforcement, protest control, election security? All of those have been floated as possible expansions. Each one blurs the line further, until one day you look up and realize the Guard is doing everything the police used to do, plus some things the police were never supposed to do. 3. The morale question. National Guard soldiers signed up to defend the nation against foreign threats and respond to natural disasters. They signed up to help their communities. Being asked to police fellow Americans, potentially their neighbors, in a foot pursuit that ends with a 20-year-old dead is a huge moral load to put on a citizen soldier. We are burning out our Guard force with these deployments. Recruiting and retention take hits when the Guard becomes a domestic police force in disguise. What can you do? Contact your governor. In each state, the governor is the commander-in-chief of the state National Guard. Ask them to weigh Guard deployments carefully. Ask whether traditional law enforcement, with better training, better funding, and better community relationships, would work better than sending in soldiers. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue. It is an American constitutional issue. And we should be thinking about it clearly, especially after a 20-year-old was killed by American soldiers on an American street. Something about that phrase should give every American pause, even if the shooting was legally justified. Because on the deepest level, the fact that it can happen at all means we have crossed a line the founders drew for us. Time for the growl, and I am growling about disaster relief. 89% approval rate for red states, 23% approval rate for blue states. That is not policy. That is not fiscal responsibility. That is not federalism. That is a reward system, and it should offend every American who has ever paid federal taxes. Let me tell you a story. It is a true story. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, Louisiana. Republican governor. Democratic mayor. Democratic-leaning state politics in a Republican-leaning federal era. President George W. Bush, whatever you thought of his response, ordered federal disaster money to flow. Billions of dollars. Because the people of Louisiana were Americans, not because they voted the right way. In 2012, Hurricane Sandy hit New Jersey and New York. Republican governor in Jersey, Democratic governor in New York. President Barack Obama, whatever you thought of him, ordered federal disaster money to flow because the people of Jersey and New York were Americans, not because they voted the right way. In 2017, Hurricane Harvey hit Texas. Republican governor, Republican state politics. President Donald Trump, whatever you thought of him, ordered federal disaster money to flow to Texas because Texans were Americans. This is the American tradition. When a disaster strikes, we respond as one country because we are one country. The federal government does not send disaster money based on how you voted. It sends money based on whether you need help. Until now. $846 million for Republican-leaning states. Arkansas tornadoes approved. West Virginia flooding denied. Washington windstorm denied. 89% approval for red. 23% approval for blue. That is not disaster response. That is redistricting through paperwork. And here is what makes me growl even harder. My conservative listeners, and I know I have plenty of you, I need you to hear me right now. You are going to have to answer for this. Because in 3 years or 6 years or 10 years, a Democrat is going to be president again. That is how our system works. Political winds shift. And when that Democrat president has a natural disaster hit Georgia, or Ohio, or Florida, or Texas, they are going to remember what this administration did. They are going to sit down with FEMA and say, quote, "Do you remember when Trump gave 89% to red states? Well, guess what? That is not vengeance. That is not payback. That is human nature. The tool that gets built for this team gets used by the next team. Every single time, without exception, anywhere in political history. And when it happens, your parents in Texas will not get their tornado relief. Your grandparents in Florida will not get their hurricane repair money. Your kids in North Carolina will lose their Helene assistance renewal. And it will be because we, this generation, on this administration, decided that federal disaster relief was a political toy instead of a national obligation. I have a solution. It is boring. It is bipartisan. It is the right one. Congress needs to codify a disaster relief formula. A dollar amount tied to damage estimates, verified by nonpartisan assessors, distributed based on need, not politics. No presidential discretion beyond urgent emergency authority. Publish the formula. Make it transparent. Make it apolitical. This is boring policy work. It will not make TikTok. It will not go viral. But it is the kind of institutional reform that protects America from itself. Because right now, we are watching one of the most important safety nets in American society get poisoned by politics. And when the water gets fully poisoned, everybody drinks it. Every party, every state, every family. Call your congressperson, both Republicans and Democrats. Ask them to introduce a Disaster Relief Formula Act. Make FEMA political blind. This can be your moment to fix something that is going to blow up on your children if we do not fix it now. $846 million for one team, zero for the other side. That is not America. That is a system on its way to breaking. That is my growl. That is episode 17 of The Growl with Hank. Quick recap. President Trump gave 2 darkly political speeches on our 250th anniversary weekend, breaking a 245-year tradition of unifying Independence Day speeches. Doha talks between the U.S. and Iran made positive progress, but paused for the Khamenei funeral, which runs through Thursday. $6 billion in Iranian frozen assets is being released. Trump made a chilling public comment about having considered striking Iranian leadership at the funeral. President Trump announced $846 million in disaster relief to Republican-leaning states, part of a broader pattern where FEMA is approving red states 89% of the time and blue states 23%. Tyron Johnson, 20 years old, was shot and killed by National Guard soldiers in Memphis. The Aspen Acres Fire in Colorado is one of the largest in state history. Gas is at $3.79. The Iran ceasefire holds, barely. If you got something from this episode, share it, especially the growl. Because a disaster relief formula act would actually help American families of every political stripe. That kind of reform starts with people like you talking about it. Subscribe wherever you listen. YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. Leave a review. Tell a friend. 17 episodes in. The bear is not slowing down. The Aspen Acres Fire in Colorado is still burning. Send a thought to the 700-plus firefighters on that line. Send a thought to the 11,000 people who are evacuated, and to the people in Memphis dealing with a National Guard shooting in their neighborhood. All Americans, all ours. I am Hank Brewski. This is the Growl. Stay sharp, stay free, and I will see you next Tuesday.